Good morning, everybody. If you could all find a seat, we'd like to start. Goodness, you're all very obedient. I wish my senior management team was like that. I'm joking. Good morning, my name is Dominic MacSorley. I am the CEO of Concern. I also have the privilege of being the current president of Alliance2015. I just want to welcome you all today to this roundtable event here in Croke Park. Maybe for those of you, and many of you have travelled quite some distance, I actually had a little bit of a problem finding Croke Park. It's such an embarrassment. It's like somebody from Paris saying, I don't know where the Eiffel Tower is. But a little bit of background, Croke Park is actually the third largest stadium in Europe, and it was on this site that the site dates back into the 1800s, but it has been very much the centre of Ireland's sporting, cultural, political and social heart. And interestingly, when I was checking it up yesterday, not just to find out where it was named after Archbishop Thomas Croke, who at an early age fought on the barricades of Paris during the French Revolution in 1848, and then returned to Ireland and became a champion not just of Gaelic football, but was part of the nationalist movement. And one of the things that he is most noted for was being part of the Land League, a champion of land reform, that really was seeking to ensure that Irish tenant farmers eventually came to own their own land, and to put a history of famine behind them. And I think even today it's relevant in that discussion as we're talking about resilience and looking at different case studies. So guys, it's not just about the stadium, it's also about the history. Can I just say I'm really delighted to welcome Irish Aid, Rory de Burca, the Director General of Irish Aid, who is here, and Nicola Brennan, who is Director of their policy, who will be coming with us this afternoon. Also want to mention Roger Bellers, and it's really important, not only because he's from ECHO, but because he actually has DRR and resilience in his title, which makes him very important and relevant for today. But importantly, I think the donors coming here and supporting this event is extremely important. Irish Aid in particular, I think, has put resilience very much at the heart, and I know within Concern we've had fantastic partnership with them as we go on this journey with them in trying to tackle and make some meaningful impact on the Sustainable Development Goals, with I think at the heart of much of this is Goals 1 and 2, although I know it's wider than that. The Alliance, just for those of you who aren't familiar, and many aren't, came together actually in 2000. David Begg was the CEO at the time, but there was 3 European organisations came together with this ambition of working together towards the Millennium Development Goals. And so for the last 17 years, this has been the ambition quietly behind the scenes. Today the Alliance is a membership of 7 European partners and operating in 88 countries with a collective budget of $1 billion. And I'm not going to go into the detail of what we're achieving, but the 3 areas that we look at is better combined emergency responses, more effective responses, focusing on pulling our resources towards more impactful development programming and policy, particularly raising our voice in relation to the evidence that we have. And in 2015, the end of the Millennium Development Goals was the turning point for the SDGs. And we sat down and we said, has enough been done? And obviously the answer was no. And we really sat down and said, we need to repurpose, reboot and refocus the Alliance towards the ambition of the SDGs. And actually we chose not to change the name. Partly it was going to be inconvenient, but it was a reminder that in 2015, that is when a new ambition was set and the clock is ticking. And we are now already into a number of years where we're seeing advances, but we're also seeing very significant retreats from development, conflict, climate change, inequality. And so we're in a very shaky, vulnerable world that feels a little bit less safe. It does feel more interconnected. But I think the importance of coming together and looking at new solutions or emerging solutions is really what today is about. I think part of the renewal of the Alliance was to establish an office for the first time in Brussels. And I'm delighted that Antonia Potter-Prentice, who, comes with decades of experience in the NGO world, is now leading our hub, our office in Brussels. And the key to this is bringing the practical evidence on the ground at the policy level, and doing it in a way that is constructive and saying, we need to pay attention to what's happening because we are getting good results. And particularly, I think, with the focus on fragile states. So I think today we're going to be hearing about, from Chad and various other countries, Kenya, other places where there is fantastic work happening. And it's a good opportunity to pause and look at that. And I think importantly, because 5 years ago, we did have a resilience roundtable, and it really established the need for funding, the need for a multi-sectoral approach. This now wants to get down into saying, this is the evidence, this is what we need to build on, this is what we need to scale up. And in a year, last year, when we nearly had 4 famines, and we certainly had 1 declared, now more than ever do we need that. We all bring our own stories here, but and we're all part of practitioners. But I think the one thing we know is, and I was speaking at something in New York recently, and I ended up having to move away from the statistics and talk about the social consequences of hunger and poverty, and the impact of shame and the impact of lack of self-esteem that has on. This is an audience where I don't need to say that to, but we need to keep that in the back of our mind. We are going to be very capably steered through the day by my colleague on the left, Margaret Ward, and needless to say, actually I ended up getting on the bus just to prove that CEOs, don't drive limos or fancy cars. And who did I run to but Margaret Ward? And we sat at the back of the bus, I think it was about 6 months ago, and we were chatting away. I don't know where you were going. And I hadn't seen Margaret since Afghanistan. And Margaret came into Afghanistan shortly after 9/11, and she was one of the few female journalists that was in there. And I have to say, I didn't know Margaret before, but boy did I know her after that. And she has extraordinary commitment in truth-telling. And these days, we need to treasure and nurture the real journalists, because it is an art form and a commitment that is lacking with the fake news that's going around. And so I'm delighted that Margaret is here. But we would like to kick off with the opening comments from our friend and colleague Rory de Burca, Director General of Irish Aid. Thank you very much, and look forward to the day.